The night my father introduced me to his guests, he pointed at me like I was a flaw in the wallpaper. "That's Daphne," he said. "No last name, no title. Just that's Daphne, the way you'd say, that's the old couch we keep meaning to throw out." I was standing in the doorway of the Hartwell Country Club banquet hall in my dress blues, pressed, decorated, earned, and my father couldn't finish his sentence fast enough before moving on to the man beside him. "And this," he said, his voice shifting into something I can only describe as pride I had never once been given, "is my son Wesley. He just made partner at Drummond & Associates, 31 years old." The room applauded. Someone clinked a glass. I stood there. I didn't move. I had learned a long time ago that if you hold very still in the moment the current hits you, it passes faster than if you fight it. My stepmother, my father's wife of 12 years, caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small smile. Not warm. Polite. The kind of smile a hostess gives a catering staff. I drove 4 hours from Fort Bragg for this. I told my CO I had a family obligation. I ironed my uniform myself at 5 a.m. in the fluorescent light of my barracks bathroom. I should have stayed home. My name is Daphne Calloway, though I've gone by a different name in certain rooms, in certain circles, for the past 3 years. But I'll get to that. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that had the bones of a happy family and none of the warmth. My father, Gerald, was a civil engineer who made good money and spent most of it on the right appearances. He remarried when I was 9, 3 years after my mother died. His new wife, Sandra, came with a 7-year-old son, Wesley, who was blonde and easy and laughed at my father's jokes. I was none of those things. I was 10 and angry, and I missed my mother, and I had her dark eyes and her stubbornness, which my father called difficult the way other fathers might call it strong. I got straight A's, and he said I was showing off. I joined the debate team, and he said I was combative. When I told him at 17 that I wanted to apply to the Air Force Academy, he looked at me over his glasses and said, "You, Daphne, be realistic." I was realistic. I applied anyway. I got in. He told people I got lucky. That was 15 years ago. I stopped keeping score somewhere around year 8, when I realized that keeping score was the only way he was still taking up space in my head. Almost stopped anyway. The dinner at the Hartwell Club was for Wesley's promotion. My father had rented out the private dining room, the one with the mahogany wainscoting and the oil portraits of men who looked like they'd never done a thing wrong in their lives. 40 guests. Open bar. A 3-course meal that probably cost more than my monthly housing allowance. I found a seat near the back and ordered water. Wesley found me during the appetizer course. He was wearing a suit that fit perfectly and had the ease of a man who has never once had to prove anything to anyone. Dath. He sat down across from me, uninvited. "You came." "I was invited." "Dad wasn't sure you'd make it." "Dad could have asked me himself." Wesley smiled. He had a gift for smiling in a way that acknowledged tension without doing anything about it. "You look... Is that a new decoration?" "On your uniform?" "It's not new." He leaned forward, squinting at my chest, at the ribbons, at the wings, at the small silver badge that most people in this room would have no way of recognizing, but that anyone in certain corners of the Pentagon would clock in under 2 seconds. He didn't recognize it. Of course he didn't. "Looks impressive," he said, leaning back. "Thank you, Wesley." He went back to his table. My father gave a speech. He talked about legacy and hard work and raising a son he was proud of. He talked about the Calloway name and what it meant to carry it with distinction. He did not look at me once. I ate my salmon. I drank my water. When dessert came, I thought about leaving. I thought about leaving. I thought about my drive back. I thought about the mission brief I had at 0600 Monday morning and how none of these people in this room had any idea what that meant or who was giving it. I was good at being invisible. I had been trained for it, actually. But again, I'll get to that. I enlisted out of the academy in 2012 and spent 2 years flying T-38s before I was selected for fighter training. The selection process is long and brutal and mostly about what you're like when everything is going wrong at once. I found out I was good at that. Not comfortable. No one is comfortable, but good. Steady. My instructor at Shepherd told me I had an unusual tolerance for ambiguity. which in pilot language means you don't freeze when the situation stops making sense. I was assigned to the 94th Fighter Squadron at Langley after my F-22 qual. The Raptor is not a forgiving aircraft. It is precise and demanding, and it will expose every weakness you have in the first 20 seconds of flight. I loved it the way you love something that respects you enough to be honest with you. My first deployment was 2016. I can't tell you where. I can tell you that I flew 17 combat sorties in 4 months and came back with a citation I can't display publicly, and a call sign that had nothing to do with what I'd been called before. They called me Spectre. It started as a joke. Something about the way my aircraft disappeared off secondary radar during a training exercise. A sensor anomaly that my flight lead couldn't explain and the debrief couldn't fully account for. Where'd Calloway go? She's a ghost. No, she's a specter. It stuck the way call signs do, which is to say permanently and without your permission. I didn't mind. I'd been disappearing in rooms my whole life. It felt like something had finally been named correctly. After the dinner, I said goodbye to my father in the parking lot. He was loosening his tie, talking to someone from his firm, and he held up a finger when he saw me, one moment, and finished his conversation before he turned. You're heading back tonight. In the morning, I said. He nodded. He looked at my uniform in the way he always looked at it, slightly uncomfortable, like it was a choice he hadn't endorsed and couldn't quite argue with. You look thin, he said. I'm fine, Dad. Wesley's having brunch tomorrow. Sandra made reservations at the Oval Room. I have to get back. Right. He put his hands in his pockets. Well, it was good of you to come. Good of you to come. Like I was a neighbor. Like I was an acquaintance who had done him a mild favor. It was good to see you, I said, because I had been trained to be precise with language, and good to see you is technically accurate without being a lie. I drove back to my hotel and sat on the edge of the bed in my uniform and didn't cry. I hadn't cried about my father in years. What I felt was more like the particular tiredness of carrying something you've long since stopped expecting anyone to help you with. I set my alarm for 5:30 and went to sleep. 3 months later, everything changed. Not because of anything dramatic. Not because I went looking for it. It changed the way most things in my career changed. Through a set of circumstances that looked random on the surface and weren't random at all. The 94th was selected for a joint readiness exercise with the Air Force Research Laboratory and a civilian contractor group out of Dayton. The exercise involved a new targeting integration system. I can speak to the concept, but not the specifics, and they needed operational pilots to run evaluation sorties while the engineering team observed from the ground. I was selected as flight lead. 4 sorties over 6 days with a full debrief after each one. The lead engineer on the contractor side was a woman named Dr. Priya, I'll leave her last name out, who had the kind of focused stillness that I recognized immediately as someone who thought faster than she spoke. We got along. She asked good questions in the debrief. She wasn't interested in what the aircraft could do in ideal conditions. She wanted to know what I did when conditions stopped being ideal. Walk me through the 3rd sortie, she said, on day 4. The moment the integration system flagged and you went manual. I walked her through it. She took notes without looking down at her paper. Your reaction time was 0.4 of a second faster than our modeled baseline, she said when I finished. The model's baseline might be off. It might be, she said, or you might be unusual. I didn't say anything. The pilots we typically evaluate, she said, adapt to the failure. You anticipated it. Approximately 2 seconds before the flag, your throttle input changed. I want to know why. I thought about it. There was a vibration pattern in the pedals, subtle. Nothing that would show on the data. You felt it. Yes. She looked at me for a long moment. Spectre, she said. Not a question. I felt something shift in the room. Excuse me? That's your call sign. She said it evenly. No drama. I've seen your name in 3 separate evaluation reports from Langley and 1 classified summary from the 2016 deployment. I wasn't connecting it to a face until right now. I kept my expression neutral. I'm not sure what reports you're referring to. She smiled barely. Of course not. She closed her notebook. I just want you to know the work you did in those evaluation sorties is going to matter. The integration we're building, the model we're refining, it exists because of data points like the ones you gave us today. Your instincts are being built into the system. I drove back to base that evening with the windows down, the October air cold and sharp, and I felt something that took me a mile or two to identify. It was satisfaction, the clean, uncomplicated kind that doesn't need anyone else in the room. 6 weeks later, my father called me. He did not call often. When he did, it was usually because Sandra had reminded him to, or because something administrative had come up. Insurance paperwork, the lake house we co-owned with my mother's estate, tax documents that needed signatures. I kept my expectations calibrated accordingly. Daphne. His voice was strange, not cold. Strange. Hi, Dad. I need to ask you something. Okay. A pause. Wesley had a client dinner last night. Department of Defense procurement. Very senior people. Another pause. One of them, a General Hartman, mentioned a pilot, an F-22 pilot. Part of some kind of evaluation program. He apparently used the word exceptional. My father stopped. I waited. He said the call sign was Spectre. I didn't answer. Daphne. His voice had changed again. Something underneath it now that I hadn't heard before. Is that you? The silence stretched out between us. Outside my window, the flight line was quiet. One of the maintenance crews was walking the perimeter with flashlights, and the lights moved slowly, like fireflies. I don't know what General Hartman told Wesley, I said finally, and I can't speak to operational details. But I have to go, Dad. I have an early morning. I hung up. I set my phone face down on the nightstand. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and waited for the feeling to arrive, the triumph, the vindication, the thing I had been waiting for since I was 17 years old, standing in his kitchen telling him my plan while he looked at me over his glasses. It didn't come, not the way I expected. What came instead was quieter. It was something closer to grief than victory, and I didn't understand that at first. I lay there for a long time working it out. I think what I felt was the loss of a version of this moment I had been carrying for a long time. In that version, he found out and he was sorry, and the sorry meant something. In that version, I felt whole afterward. The actual version was, he found out because a general mentioned it at his son's client dinner, and he called me, and I didn't confirm it, and tomorrow I would get up at 5:30 and fly. That was it. That was the version that was real. I decided it was enough. I decided, lying there in the dark, that I was going to let it be enough. Wesley called me 2 weeks after that. I almost didn't pick up. We were mid-cycle on a new training rotation, and I had approximately 37 things on my mind that had nothing to do with my family. But I saw his name and something made me answer. Hey. His voice was different too. Not the smooth, easy register he usually occupied. Something careful in it. Like he was handling a thing he didn't want to drop. Wesley. I want to apologize. I sat down. I hadn't been expecting that. For what specifically? For the dinner, at the club. He took a breath. I've been thinking about it since. The way Dad introduced you. The way he talked about you. Didn't talk about you. He stopped. It wasn't right. It's never been right, and I went along with it for a long time because it was easier. I didn't say anything. I didn't know, he said. I mean, I knew you were in the military, obviously, but I didn't know. I don't have any frame for what you actually do. General Hartman, when he said your name, your call sign, the way the other people at the table reacted. He stopped again. Dad looked like he didn't know who you were. He doesn't, I said. Not really. I know. Wesley's voice was quiet. I think I've always known that, and I told myself it wasn't my problem. That's the part I'm apologizing for. I looked out the window, the flight line again, the aircraft on the ramp, still and dark, waiting. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. Genuinely. Not the way I meant good to see you. Actually meant it. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you love it? What you do? I thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved. I thought about the feel of the aircraft at 40,000 feet, the way the horizon goes slightly curved up there, the way everything that matters on the ground, everything that can hurt you, diminish you, make you small, becomes geometrically irrelevant at that altitude. Yes, I said. I do? I'm glad, he said. I'm really glad. My father came to Langley in February. He didn't tell me he was coming. I got a call from the front gate. There's a Mr. Gerald Calloway here, says he's your father, and I sat with that for a moment before I said to let him through. He was standing in the parking lot when I came out, hands in his coat pockets, looking up at a pair of F-22s holding in the pattern overhead. His face had an expression I had never seen on it before. He looked small in a way that had nothing to do with his size. I stopped about 10 feet away. Dad. He turned. He looked at me in my flight suit, helmet bag over my shoulder, and something moved across his face that I couldn't read, and then I could. It was recognition. Not of me. He had always known who I was physically. It was recognition of something else. Of what I had been all along while he was busy underestimating me. He opened his mouth and closed it. Did you want a tour? I asked. I can ask someone to take you through the visitor center. Daphne. I'm in the middle of a duty day, Dad. I have a sortie in 2 hours. I know. I'm sorry. I wanted to see. He looked up at the aircraft again. I wanted to see where you work. I looked at him for a long moment. He was 63 years old, and his hair had gone mostly gray, and he had driven 3.5 hours without calling ahead, because he didn't know how to call ahead. Didn't know how to say, I need to understand who you are in any form other than showing up. I made a decision. Come on, I said. I'll walk you to the flight line. I didn't take his arm. I didn't forgive him in a wave of feeling the way it happens in movies. I just started walking and he fell in beside me, and we walked across the tarmac in the thin February light while the Raptors overhead cut their pattern and turned for final, and I told him what I could. The aircraft, the mission, the training cycle, the team, and he listened, really listened, for what might have been the first time in my life. He stopped at the edge of the restricted area looking at the row of jets on the ramp. I told you to be realistic, he said. You did. I was wrong. 3 words. He said them to the aircraft, not to me. But he said them to the aircraft, not to me. But he said them. I know. I told him. We stood there for a while. The wind off the field was cold and direct, and neither of us moved away from it. I don't know what my father felt in that moment. I know what I felt, and it was not what the 17-year-old version of me would have predicted. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't the collapse of all the old hurt into something resolved and clean. It was more like standing on a runway at dawn. That particular moment before you taxi out, when everything is still and potential and you are exactly as capable as you have trained yourself to be, and the only thing left is to go. I had worked my whole life to get to that runway. My father had spent most of my life telling me it didn't exist. We were both standing on it now. I have to get back, I said. Of course. He nodded. He put his hands back in his pockets. You're good at this, he said. Aren't you? Not a question. Finally. Yes, I said. I am. I walked back across the tarmac. I didn't look back. The wind was at my back now, and the aircraft were waiting, and I had 2 hours before I had to be in the sky. I used them well. I've thought a lot about that parking lot conversation. My father saying it was good of you to come, like I was a neighbor who had stopped by to drop off a casserole, and me standing there in a uniform I had earned, holding everything I was inside something he had never once asked to understand. For a long time, I believed the problem was that he didn't see me. But I've come to think the problem was more specific than that. He saw exactly who I was. He just decided early on that what he saw wasn't worth much. And once a person makes that decision, they spend years looking for evidence to confirm it, rather than evidence to revise it. That's not cruelty exactly. It's something more ordinary and more damaging. It's a closed mind wearing the face of a parent. What I know now, that I didn't know at 22, is that other people's assessments of your potential are data points, not verdicts. My father looked at me and calculated a ceiling. I flew past it so many times I stopped being able to see it from where I was. That's not because I'm exceptional in some cosmic sense. It's because I refuse to let his arithmetic be the final math. There's a thing that happens when you commit fully to something hard, not for someone else's approval, not to prove a point, but because the work itself demands everything you have and you discover you want to give it. The noise falls away. My father's voice fell away. The dinner at the Hartwell Club fell away. What was left was the aircraft and the mission and the team and the kind of focus that doesn't leave room for old wounds to fester. That's not suppression. That's replacement. Filling the space with something real enough that the hollow thing can't find purchase anymore. Wesley called to apologize, and I was surprised by how much it mattered. Not because I needed it, I had genuinely stopped needing it, but because it was honest. He said I went along with it because it was easier, and I respected him for not dressing that up into something more flattering. It takes a particular kind of integrity to name your own cowardice without making yourself the hero of the naming. He did that. It changed something between us that I think needed changing. And my father, standing at the edge of the flight line in February, looking up at aircraft he had spent decades dismissing as my unrealistic dream, saying I was wrong to the jets instead of to my face, that was the version of him I think he was capable of. Not the version I needed at 17, but the version that was real at 63. I decided to accept it. Not because he deserved acceptance, but because carrying the alternative was a weight I was done paying to haul. Daphne Calloway became Spectre, not because she was trying to prove anything. She became Spectre because she showed up every single day and did the work with everything she had. The recognition followed the effort, not the other way around. That's the only sequence that holds. Your integrity is built in the hours nobody applauds. Your capability is built in the training cycles nobody films. Your character is built in the moments you choose to keep going when the person who was supposed to believe in you has made it clear they don't. Those are the only 3 things worth building. Everything else is someone else's arithmetic.